Do you ever wonder about those cheap recipes only the Amish know how to make? In quiet kitchens, they turned flour, milk, and faith into meals that filled both body and soul. What did they understand about simplicity that the rest of us forgot? Shoofly pie was the sweet heart of the Amish kitchen, proof that even the simplest pantry could create something extraordinary. Made from nothing more than molasses, flour, sugar, and hot water, this pie was rich in flavor but humble in origin. The crust was rolled by hand, filled with a sticky, sweet syrup that bubbled up through the crumb topping as it baked. The smell alone, warm molasses, toasted sugar, and butter, was enough to draw every child to the table before it even cooled. It was born in lean times when every ingredient mattered and nothing could be wasted. The pie was both dessert and memory, a reflection of life itself, plain, honest, and deeply satisfying. Served with coffee in the morning or cream after supper, it represented comfort that money could not buy. Shoofly pie was more than sweetness. It was a reminder that resourcefulness could taste like luxury when made with love. Amish friendship bread was more than just bread. It was a bond, a passing of kindness from one home to another. It started with a simple starter, a bubbling mix of flour, sugar, and milk that was fed and shared over time. When a neighbor handed you a jar of starter, they were giving more than dough, they were offering connection. Every loaf baked from it carried the warmth of community, its scent filling kitchens with cinnamon, vanilla, and comfort. It stretched through generations, each recipe a little different, but equally filled with care. You could taste the patience, the faith, and the friendship in every slice. It was never about perfection. It was about people, about sharing abundance even when there was little to spare. In that way, friendship bread was not just a recipe. It was a legacy of generosity, one rising loaf at a time. Poor man's steak was the working family's answer to Sunday dinner when real steak was out of reach. Ground beef or leftover scraps were shaped into patties, seasoned simply, and baked in a rich homemade gravy until tender. The edges browned beautifully, the gravy thickened to silk, and the smell filled the whole house. Served with mashed potatoes or buttered noodles, it was hearty enough to fool anyone into thinking it was a feast. The secret was slow cooking and care, two things that cost nothing but made everything better. Each bite carried the taste of home, of making do and making it good. Poor man's steak wasn't about imitation, it was about pride. It proved that with time, patience, and love, even the humblest meal could taste like abundance. Chicken corn soup was the soup of every season, simple but full of heart. It began with bones saved from Sunday's roast, simmered slowly until the broth turned golden and rich. Sweet corn and diced potatoes were added next, filling the pot with sweetness and comfort. Homemade noodles, rolled thin, cut by hand, and dusted with flour, gave it body and soul. The smell of simmering broth drifted through open windows, calling family to the table long before it was ready. It was a dish built on thrift and memory, proof that nothing from the farm ever went to waste. Each spoonful was soft and soothing, a taste of warmth and wisdom passed down through generations. Chicken corn soup was nourishment for body and spirit alike. Fried cornmeal mush was the meal that never failed, whether for breakfast or supper. Yesterday's cornmeal porridge was poured into pans, chilled, and sliced thick before hitting the skillet. The butter hissed as each piece browned to a golden crust, the inside soft and creamy as pudding. It was the kind of food that tasted better the second time around, sweetened with syrup or served beside fried eggs. For the Amish, it was a dish of virtue, simple, frugal, and satisfying. It made the most of what you had and wasted nothing. Each bite tasted like comfort, like home after a long day. Fried cornmeal mush was proof that even the plainest food could be a masterpiece in the right hands. Egg noodles from scratch were the soul of Amish cooking. Humble, handmade, and endlessly useful. Just eggs, flour, and salt were kneaded into a firm dough, rolled out thin and cut with care. The strands dried on wooden racks or towel-lined tables, catching sunlight from kitchen windows. They boiled quickly, filling the room with the scent of simplicity. Served with butter, gravy, or tossed into soups, they were as dependable as they were delicious. Making noodles by hand was a lesson in patience and pride. Every roll, every cut a quiet prayer for nourishment. No machines, no shortcuts, just steady work and faith in the result. Egg noodles were not just food. They were tradition, spun by hand and shared with love. Potato donuts were the sweet surprise of thrift, soft and golden rings born from yesterday's mashed potatoes. The dough came together with flour, sugar, milk, and a touch of yeast or baking powder, rising slow under clean cloths as the kitchen filled with the quiet promise of sweetness. When the time was right, mothers rolled out the dough and cut circles by hand, saving the centers for smaller treats. The sizzling oil filled the air with warmth, the sound of bubbles and frying dough like music on a cold morning. Each donut puffed up light, the mashed potatoes keeping them tender long after cooling. Once lifted from the pan, they were dusted with sugar or dipped in a simple glaze made from milk and vanilla. Children waited eagerly, fingers dusted white before the first bite. These donuts didn't need fancy tools or rich ingredients. They were built from patience and care. They turned leftovers into joy, turning a quiet morning into a moment of sweetness. Even after days of hard labor and thrift, potato donuts made life taste soft again, reminding families that small miracles could rise from even the most humble kitchens. Ham and bean soup was the meal that carried families through long winters, slow-cooked on wood stoves that warmed both hands and hearts. A single ham bone saved from Sunday dinner was enough to flavor a whole pot of white beans, onions, and carrots. Sometimes celery or garlic found its way in, if the garden had any left to give. The beans simmered for hours until soft, thickening the broth naturally, while the meat fell from the bone in tender shreds. The smell filled every room, a mix of smoke, salt, and comfort that promised fullness. It was eaten with bread or cornbread, ladled into deep bowls that steamed in the cold air. Leftovers were even better the next day, richer and heartier after sitting overnight. For the Amish, this soup was more than a recipe. It was a rhythm of life. It spoke of thrift, patience, and gratitude for every bit of nourishment the earth and table provided. Ham and bean soup reminded everyone that love could be boiled down, shared, and still keep giving. Apple butter was patience in a pot, the slow rhythm of autumn preserved for the long winter ahead. Apples were peeled, cored, and cooked down for hours in large copper kettles, stirred with long wooden paddles to keep them from burning. Sugar, cinnamon, and cloves were added little by little, their scent filling the home and drifting out through open windows. It was an all-day affair. One person adding wood to the stove, another tasting, another stirring, the laughter and chatter making the wait feel shorter. As it thickened, the apples transformed into something dark, glossy, and smooth as silk. When finally ready, it was poured into jars and sealed, each one holding a season's worth of sweetness and effort. In winter, it was spread over bread or biscuits, a taste of sunshine when snow lay heavy on the ground. Apple butter wasn't just food. It was a promise that even when the world turned cold, warmth could be found in a jar, born from patience and love. Pickled red beets and eggs brought color and tang to even the plainest tables, their ruby hue shining through glass jars on pantry shelves. The process began with beets simmered in vinegar, sugar, and warm spices like cloves or allspice until tender and fragrant. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and dropped into the hot brine, soaking up its jewel-toned color day by day. By the third day, the eggs had turned a deep pink, the whites glowing like stained glass, and the flavor had deepened to a perfect balance of sweet and sour. They were served beside stews, sandwiches, or slices of fresh bread, each bite adding brightness to the meal. The beets themselves were sweet and earthy, their tang waking up tired winter palates. This was food made to last, stretching freshness into months of color and flavor. Every Amish kitchen had a jar waiting on the shelf, a cheerful reminder that beauty could be bottled from thrift. Pickled red beets and eggs were more than a side dish. They were an act of artful survival, joy preserved through patience and care. Corn fritters were the taste of late summer joy, a golden mix of sweetness and savor born straight from the garden. Kernels were cut fresh from the cob, their milk thick and sweet, then stirred into a batter of flour, eggs, and a touch of sugar. The mixture was dropped into hot oil or butter, frying until crisp at the edges and tender within. The scent filled the kitchen with warmth and nostalgia, the sound of sizzling a melody of home. Eaten plain, dusted with sugar, or drizzled with syrup, they were loved by both children and grown folk alike. For the Amish, fritters were a celebration of harvest, a way to honor the land's bounty while wasting nothing. Whether served at breakfast or as a side for supper, they brought sunshine to every plate. In each bite was the taste of simplicity perfected, proof that happiness could be fried up from what grew just outside the door. Amish cabbage casserole was the food of quiet evenings, hearty, wholesome, and meant to fill more than just hunger. Layers of chopped cabbage, rice, and ground beef came together under a creamy sauce made from milk, butter, and flour, baked until tender and bubbling. The cabbage softened to sweetness, the rice absorbed every bit of savory richness, and the beef gave it substance. The smell drifted through the home, cozy and familiar, wrapping around every room like a blanket. Sometimes cheese was added on top for a golden crust, but it didn't need it to feel complete. This was the kind of dish that waited patiently in the oven while chores were finished or prayers were said. It wasn't fancy, but it carried warmth in every bite, the kind of warmth that lingered long after the plates were cleared. For the Amish, this casserole was more than sustenance. It was a gesture of care, proof that even simple food could feel abundant. Every spoonful spoke of gratitude, of hands that worked and hearts that shared. Amish cabbage casserole was comfort, thrift, and togetherness baked into one perfect dish. Rivel soup was the kind of meal that came from nothing and somehow became everything. A pot of chicken broth simmered slow while hands worked flour and egg into tiny, irregular dough crumbs called rivels. These humble bits were dropped into the bubbling broth, puffing up into soft, chewy morsels that turned simple broth into something hearty and complete. Sometimes leftover vegetables, carrots, celery, or onions, were stirred in for extra depth, but the rivels always stole the spotlight. The steam rose gently from the pot, carrying the scent of home and hope. It was food for long winters and weary bodies, the kind that filled more than just the stomach. No two batches were ever exactly the same, but that was the charm. Each bowl told its own story of improvisation and care. For the Amish, Rivel soup represented the art of making do and doing it well, the quiet pride of turning scarcity into satisfaction. It was humble food that asked for little and gave much, a bowl full of comfort born from the simplest of hands. Baked oatmeal was breakfast made beautiful in its simplicity and strength. Oats, milk, eggs, sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon came together in one bowl, baked until the edges turned golden and the center set soft and firm. The scent filled the kitchen with warmth, a quiet promise of comfort before the day's work began. Once sliced, it was served with milk poured over or a drizzle of honey, sometimes with apples, raisins, or nuts mixed in for a touch of luxury. It was hearty enough to last through chores and kind enough to soothe cold mornings. The texture was soft but satisfying, tender like pudding, yet strong enough to hold its shape. It wasn't the kind of breakfast that called for praise. It was steady, dependable, and full of heart. Families baked it in big pans on Sundays and warmed leftovers through the week, each serving tasting like care made tangible. In every bite was love, patience, and the unspoken comfort of knowing that even simple food could start the day beautifully. Dandelion greens with hot bacon dressing were the taste of early spring, the moment the world turned green again after months of gray. Families went out to gather wild greens by hand, picking tender young leaves before they grew bitter. Back home, bacon sizzled in the skillet, releasing its smoky aroma as vinegar, sugar, and a little salt were stirred into the hot drippings to make a dressing both tangy and rich. The mixture was poured warm over the freshly washed greens, wilting them just enough without losing their vibrant bite. Every forkful carried a balance of sharp, sweet, and savory, like sunshine meeting earth. It was a dish that cost nothing but time and gratitude, a celebration of nature's generosity. Often served with boiled eggs or potatoes, it turned a foraged plant into a feast. For the Amish, it was a reminder that the simplest things, made with care and attention, could taste like grace itself. Dandelion greens with hot bacon dressing weren't just food. They were a sign of life renewed. Potato pancakes were the meal that made thrift taste glorious. Grated potatoes were mixed with egg, onion, flour, and a dash of salt, then spooned into hot butter or lard to sizzle and crisp. The kitchen filled with the sound of frying and the scent of comfort, a promise that dinner would be good. Each pancake was browned to perfection, crisp on the edges, tender in the center, and full of rustic flavor. They were served hot with applesauce, sour cream, or even a drizzle of syrup, depending on the day and what the pantry allowed. Every family had its own way. Some used mashed potatoes, others preferred them raw and grated, but all agreed they were worth every minute. They turned leftovers into luxury and simplicity into satisfaction. For the Amish, potato pancakes were the taste of resourcefulness, the art of turning scraps into something extraordinary. Each bite carried history, warmth, and the sound of laughter echoing around the table. Apple dumplings were little parcels of sweetness wrapped in love. Whole apples were peeled, cored, and tucked inside tender pastry, their hollow centers sometimes filled with a spoonful of butter, sugar, and cinnamon before being folded shut. Once placed in a pan of bubbling syrup made from brown sugar, water, and more butter, they baked slowly, their scent filling every corner of the home. The air turned heavy with cinnamon and comfort, the kind of smell that made time slow down. When the syrup thickened and the pastry turned golden, they emerged soft and glistening, ready to melt in the mouth. Served with cream, milk, or even ice cream if there was any, they tasted like autumn captured on a plate. It was the kind of dessert that turned an ordinary evening into a quiet celebration. For the Amish, apple dumplings weren't about indulgence. They were about gratitude, a way to honor the harvest and the hands that made it possible. The apples came from backyard trees, the pastry from simple staples, the love from daily rhythm. It was proof that comfort didn't come from luxury. It came from care, from the warmth of an oven, and from the joy of sharing something made slow and from scratch. Sweet cabbage slaw was a dish that found its way to every table, no matter the season or occasion. Heads of crisp cabbage were sliced thin with a steady hand, each shred catching the light as it fell into a large wooden bowl. A dressing of vinegar, sugar, salt, and sometimes mustard or cream was poured over and tossed until the slaw glistened. The scent was sharp and fresh, a reminder of both summer picnics and winter suppers alike. It paired perfectly with fried chicken, casseroles, or even just bread and butter, its bright flavor cutting through heavy meals with balance and cheer. For the Amish, slaw was more than a side. It was a way of preserving freshness, of bringing the garden to the table long after the harvest had passed. Some added grated carrots or onions for color, others kept it plain and pure, but all agreed it belonged at every gathering. Sweet cabbage slaw was the meeting of thrift and abundance, a simple miracle of what the earth could offer when tended with care. Every bite was crisp, cool, and alive, a humble reminder that even the simplest foods could carry the memory of sunshine. Baked custard was the taste of gentleness itself, a dessert so soft it seemed to calm the room around it. Milk, eggs, sugar, and a touch of vanilla were whisked together and poured into small cups that sat in a pan of warm water. As they baked, the air filled with the faint sweetness of cream and spice, a scent both comforting and old-fashioned. When finished, the tops turned lightly golden, and the custard beneath trembled like silk. Served warm with a sprinkle of nutmeg or chilled from the icebox, it was a dessert that soothed rather than dazzled. For many Amish families, baked custard was both nourishment and comfort, a reminder that simplicity could still feel indulgent. It was a recipe that required patience, no rushing, no high heat, just trust in time and texture. Each spoonful was smooth, sweet, and deeply satisfying, the kind of dessert that lingered in memory long after the dishes were done. It was the flavor of home, humble, steady, and made with care. Baked custard was proof that luxury didn't need expense, only tenderness and time. Fried bologna sandwiches with mustard were the taste of hard work rewarded, the kind of lunch that could be made in 5 minutes and remembered for hours. Thick slices of bologna were dropped into a hot skillet, their edges curling like petals as they browned. The scent was savory and smoky, the kind that filled a farmhouse fast. 2 slices of white bread, soft and plain, were spread with mustard, sometimes spicy, sometimes sweet, and pressed around the hot meat. The bread soaked up the flavor, the bologna crisped just enough, and each bite was hearty and familiar. Some families added cheese or a fried egg, others topped it with onions or lettuce when the garden allowed, but the essence never changed. It was quick, filling, and cheap, a meal that tasted better than it had any right to. For the Amish and their rural neighbors, fried bologna wasn't poor food, it was practical food, made with pride and purpose. It carried the comfort of routine, the satisfaction of simplicity, and the flavor of resilience. Fried bologna sandwiches with mustard were a small reminder that good meals don't need grandeur, just heat, hands, and heart. Potato filling was a dish that brought warmth to even the coldest evenings, a simple blend of mashed potatoes, bread cubes, onions, and milk baked until golden and crisp on top. The potatoes were whipped smooth with butter and cream, while cubes of day-old bread soaked up the richness. Onions, sautéed until soft and fragrant, added a savory depth that turned plain starch into something special. When baked, the top formed a buttery crust that cracked gently under the spoon, revealing a creamy heart within. The smell filled the home with comfort, the kind that settled everyone before a word was spoken. It was a meal of thrift and ingenuity, created to stretch ingredients without ever feeling meager. Every bite tasted of home, of warmth shared and work well done. Potato filling was the kind of food that made the table feel full even in lean times. It carried the spirit of care in every spoonful, proving that love and patience could turn humble scraps into something that felt like plenty. Served beside chicken or alone in a bowl, it was both side dish and centerpiece. A reminder that true satisfaction comes not from excess, but from effort made with heart. Homemade egg custard pie was a dessert of faith, simple, pure, and built from the trust that a few good ingredients could make something extraordinary. Eggs, milk, sugar, and a touch of vanilla were whisked together and poured into an unbaked crust. As it baked, the mixture transformed into a soft, trembling custard crowned with a thin, golden skin. The scent was gentle but inviting, sweetened air that whispered of patience and home. When sliced, it wobbled slightly, the center creamy and smooth, tasting of comfort itself. It was the pie of practicality, made from what every kitchen always had, never wasteful, always comforting. The first bite was delicate, sweet, and calming, like a prayer answered quietly. It did not need adornment or decoration. Its beauty lay in its humility. Egg custard pie was served after Sunday dinners or carried to neighbors in times of joy or sorrow alike. It was the taste of continuity, the flavor of faith in the ordinary. Slippery pot pie was a hearty, breathy comfort that blurred the line between soup and stew. Unlike the crusted pies most imagine, Amish pot pie was filled with flat, hand-rolled noodles instead of pastry. A chicken was boiled slow until tender, then pulled apart and added back to the golden broth along with thick ribbons of dough. The noodles cooked soft but substantial, soaking up the flavor of the meat and vegetables. Steam rose from the pot, carrying the scent of salt, fat, and care. The dish was generous and forgiving. No two batches ever quite the same, yet always familiar. The texture was rich, the flavor layered, the feeling one of calm abundance. It was the kind of food that quieted a busy household, filling bellies and hearts at once. Slippery pot pie was sustenance for body and soul, proof that simplicity and patience could yield more satisfaction than the finest feast. Vinegar pie was born from scarcity, but baked with hope. In times when fruit was a luxury and lemons hard to come by, thrifty hands turned pantry staples into magic. Flour, sugar, butter, and a bit of vinegar came together to mimic the tang of lemon, creating a custard-like filling that baked golden and fragrant. The vinegar's sharpness softened in the oven, leaving behind a sweet tart flavor that lingered like memory. The crust crackled under the knife, the filling silky and rich, though no cream was used. It was a pie that proved how creativity could sweeten even the hardest years. Housewives baked it during the Depression, when every scrap mattered, when faith and flour kept families going. Vinegar pie wasn't about luxury. It was about love, ingenuity, and endurance. Each bite was a reminder that sweetness can rise from even the simplest beginnings. The scent of the baking pie filled small kitchens with hope, a quiet defiance against scarcity. Children would wait by the stove, noses pressed close, watching the bubbles form under the golden top. It was a dessert that asked for patience, not plenty, and rewarded both. Even decades later, the recipe endured, written in fading ink on old cards, carried forward by generations who knew that a little tang and a lot of love could keep sweetness alive when everything else ran thin. Zucchini relish was the summer's second chance, the way abundance found a home in glass jars for the months ahead. Gardeners grated mountains of zucchini, mixed it with onions, peppers, and a bath of vinegar, sugar, and spices. It simmered until fragrant, then cooled and sealed for keeping. The result was bright and tangy, a condiment that turned plain bread, beans, or meat into a small celebration. It sparkled with color, green, yellow, and red flecks dancing in the jar. Zucchini relish was proof that waste had no place in an Amish kitchen. Every garden surplus became a treasure to be shared. On dark winter days, when the fields lay silent, the pop of a jar's seal brought sunshine back to the table. It was food as memory, work as gratitude, flavor as faith. Zucchini relish was not just preserved produce, it was preserved joy. The process itself was ritual, each step done with patience, the washing, the chopping, the stirring, until the scent filled the whole house. Jars were lined up like soldiers, cooling on the counter, each one holding the memory of long summer days. It was thrift turned art, abundance turned hope, the promise that no season of plenty would ever be forgotten. Amish peanut butter spread was childhood in a jar. Equal parts peanut butter, marshmallow creme, and corn syrup were whipped together until light, fluffy, and sweet enough to make anyone smile. It spread easily on warm bread, melted slightly, and stuck to fingers just enough to lick clean. It was the taste of church picnics, of school lunches packed with love, of treats made when money was tight but joy was abundant. The mix was smooth, golden, and rich without indulgence. Some added honey for depth, others left it plain and simple, just as it had always been. It was a spread that reminded children of home and parents of their own youth. Amish peanut butter spread wasn't just food, it was a small kindness, a sweet gesture that made even the humblest loaf feel special. Mothers made it in batches before gatherings, stirring with care as laughter filled the kitchen. It sat on long wooden tables beside homemade bread, apple butter, and pickles, each bite part of a shared blessing. There was something honest about it. No pretense, no fuss, just comfort you could taste. Even years later, a spoonful could take you back to wooden benches, sunshine through the window, and the simple joy of being fed with love. Scalloped potatoes with onions were the quiet luxury of simple homes. Thin slices of potato were layered with onions, dots of butter, and splashes of milk or cream. As it baked, the top browned beautifully, the edges bubbling with golden richness. The smell alone was comfort, warm, earthy, and welcoming. Every slice held soft potatoes surrounded by creamy sauce, the onions melting into sweetness. It was served as both side and centerpiece, proof that even a root and a bulb could become a feast when handled with love. The Amish knew that patience turned plain food into art. Scalloped potatoes with onions were food for families, for quiet evenings, for gratitude. It was the humble dish that never failed to fill both table and heart. Families made it on Sundays, when the stove burned steady and conversation came easy. The bubbling sound from the oven felt like a song of home, familiar and soft. Each pan carried love baked deep into its layers, proof that abundance doesn't come from excess. It comes from care. When the meal was done, there was always one spoon left to scrape the corners clean, chasing every bit of cream and caramelized onion, savoring the final taste of contentment. Homemade applesauce cake was memory baked into every crumb. Using leftover applesauce, flour, sugar, and spices, it rose into a moist, fragrant loaf that filled homes with warmth. Cinnamon and clove gave it heart, while the applesauce kept it tender for days. It was a cake that needed no frosting, just a dusting of sugar or a drizzle of glaze if one felt fancy. The first slice always carried the scent of autumn, of orchards and wood smoke, of home itself. Made for birthdays or no reason at all, it was the dessert that turned scarcity into sweetness. Each bite tasted like history, familiar, forgiving, and full of love. Mothers baked it on cool mornings when the world outside was still and quiet and the smell wrapped the house like a blanket. It was a recipe passed through generations, handwritten on worn cards, smudged with flour and memory. Applesauce cake was gentle food, steady, kind, and honest. It wasn't about celebration, but gratitude, about making joy from what was already there. Long after the last crumb was gone, the scent lingered, whispering of patience, faith, and love baked slow. Noodles with brown butter and breadcrumbs turned the simplest ingredients into something worthy of praise. Freshly boiled egg noodles were tossed in browned butter until glistening, then topped with toasted crumbs that added crunch and richness. The aroma was nutty and warm, the flavor deep and satisfying. It was food that cost almost nothing but felt abundant. The butter browned just shy of burning, releasing a scent that filled the kitchen with warmth. Breadcrumbs, saved from yesterday's loaf, became treasure in this humble dish. It was proof that waste was foreign to Amish hands. Every crumb found its calling. Served beside vegetables or meat, noodles with brown butter were comfort disguised as elegance. It was the meal you made when there was little left to give, but plenty of heart to share. Each bite held the care of the cook, the timing, the stirring, the watchful eye over the pan. Nothing about it was rushed. Everything about it was intentional. The dish spoke softly but proudly. Flavor comes from patience, from humility, from the simple act of doing things right. Custard bread pudding was sweetness reborn from scraps. Leftover bread was torn into pieces and soaked in milk, sugar, and beaten eggs until soft. Spices like cinnamon or nutmeg joined the mix before baking, turning the kitchen into a sanctuary of scent. When finished, it emerged golden and puffed, the top crisp, the inside tender and creamy. A drizzle of syrup or cream transformed it from humble to heavenly. Every bite was a reminder that waste was a choice, and the Amish never chose it. Custard bread pudding made old bread young again, proving that with patience and care, nothing good was ever truly gone. It was food born of mindfulness, of hands that refused to throw away what could still nourish. Grandmothers stirred it slow, humming as they worked, knowing each step by heart. The dish cooled on the windowsill, steam rising in soft ribbons, drawing children near before it was ready. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. Its beauty lay in its honesty, in how it turned the ordinary into comfort. Custard bread pudding was love recycled, a sweet reminder that grace lives in second chances. For the Amish, preserving the harvest is both a necessity and an art, and apple butter is a delicious result of that tradition. This sweet, spiced spread originated as a way to use up an abundance of apples, often collected during the peak of the harvest season. Unlike traditional butter, it contains no dairy, just apples cooked low and slow until they caramelize into a rich, smooth spread. The ingredients are deceptively simple: apples, cider or water, sugar, and spices like cinnamon and cloves. The apples are simmered for hours, allowing their natural sugars to intensify while the mixture thickens to perfection. The slow cooking process is where the magic happens, transforming humble fruit into a velvety spread that's bursting with autumnal flavor. Apple butter is as practical as it is versatile. Spread it on warm Amish white bread, swirl it into oatmeal, or use it as a secret ingredient in baked goods for extra moisture and depth of flavor. Apple butter can even double as a healthier sweetener in recipes because it retains the fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants of its core ingredient while avoiding the preservatives of store-bought options. Dried soup beans were a big staple for winters, and Amish families pretty much relied on dried beans being stored in bulk levels to last throughout the winter. They were really economical, super filling, and they lasted an entirety if you knew how to take care of them. Of course, the Amish were experts in that. They were also just really common in most Amish one-pot meals like thick soups and stews, but they had a bit of a preference for beans. It seems most communities didn't really step outside the usual routine of navy beans, pinto and lima beans, and great northern beans. The pinto beans were honestly just there because some Amish-Mexican hybrid food would slap harder than it had any right to. Ham and bean soup, which great northern beans were pretty much typically used for, was used in one of the most classic Amish meals. Ham and bean soup was made by simmering lots of navy beans with ham hocks, and it was delicious. I mean, it was really punching above its weight. Pimento cheese spread stood as a creamy, flavorful favorite that doubled as a dip or sandwich filling and became iconic in southern kitchens. This spread combined sharp cheddar cheese with mayonnaise and diced pimentos, creating a smooth yet tangy mixture that brought vibrant color and taste to simple dishes. Pimento cheese's appeal was rooted in its versatility and ease of preparation, making it a go-to for quick snacks, party platters, and picnic fare. Families cherished this recipe for its comforting richness and ability to elevate basic ingredients. It was also budget-friendly, relying on readily available pantry staples to produce a satisfying result. The spread became a cultural staple, symbolizing Southern hospitality and home cooking traditions. Its creamy texture and bright flavor offered a delicious contrast to crackers, bread, or raw vegetables. Pimento cheese spread remains a beloved classic that reflects the warmth and resourcefulness of mid-20th century American kitchens. Cheese and pineapple skewers were a cheerful, bite-sized appetizer that embodied the playful spirit of 1960s entertaining. Cubes of sharp cheddar cheese alternated with sweet pineapple chunks threaded onto toothpicks or cocktail sticks, creating an attractive and easy-to-eat party snack. The contrasting flavors of salty, savory cheese with juicy tropical pineapple made for a pleasing combination that delighted guests at cocktail parties, potlucks, and family gatherings. These skewers required no cooking and minimal preparation, allowing hosts to quickly assemble a tasty and visually appealing dish. This simple recipe reflected the era's fondness for finger foods that combined convenience with a touch of sophistication. Though the popularity of pineapple in savory dishes has waned, cheese and pineapple skewers remain a nostalgic symbol of mid-century Americana and its inventive yet accessible approach to casual entertaining. Cracker Stack lunches were the shortcut every lunchbox kid quietly loved, and every parent threw together when time was short. You took Ritz crackers, layered slices of American cheese between them, and tossed in some apple slices on the side. It was simple, salty, and filled you up without needing to cook a thing. Old lunchbox guides always had this one listed because it hit that sweet spot between easy, affordable, and kid-friendly. Some folks swapped in peanut butter or ham, but the classic cheese and cracker combo stuck around the longest. It was not gourmet, but it got the job done. Quick, portable, and ready before the bus pulled up. It sounds basic now, but for families juggling busy mornings and tight grocery budgets, Cracker Stacks were a reliable lunch that needed zero effort to pull off. In Amish kitchens, practicality often trumps extravagance, and few dishes embody that principle like poor man's steak. Born out of the need to make the most of affordable ingredients, this recipe turns humble ground beef into a hearty, satisfying meal. It's not steak in the traditional sense, but its rich flavor and comforting texture make it every bit as memorable. The ingredients are straightforward. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, milk, onions, and seasonings are combined to form thick patties. These are browned, then baked in a creamy gravy made from milk, flour, and butter. The result is a dish that's flavorful, filling, and surprisingly elegant for something so budget-friendly. Versatility is where poor man's steak really shines. Add mushrooms to the gravy, use turkey instead of beef for a leaner option, or pair it with mashed potatoes, noodles, or rice. The dish adapts effortlessly to what you have on hand, making it a favorite for feeding a family without breaking the bank. From a health perspective, the protein in the beef provides energy, while the gravy and sides make it a well-rounded meal. It's a masterclass in Amish resourcefulness, taking inexpensive ingredients and turning them into a dish that feels like a luxury. Home fermented sauerkraut was something that was essentially just Amish and Pennsylvania Dutch communities came up with. I mean, no, not sauerkraut itself. That was a German tradition through and through. Please put the guns down, guys. Homemade sauerkraut was a German and Swiss tradition, yes, but when they came over here, they obviously brought that part of their lives with them. Instead of using modern jars, Amish families would typically ferment cabbage in these stoneware crocks or large ceramic pots, and sometimes these things would cross over 20 pounds, so really, it was heavy. The cabbage that they would ferment in these, and it wasn't necessary for it to just be cabbage or sauerkraut all the time, they fermented a lot, but anyway, the cabbage was something that they would leave to ferment for around 4 to 6 weeks. At the end of it, families ate sauerkraut with pork on New Year's, and they also believed that it would help bring a lot of prosperity and good fortune to the years that were coming. I mean, hey, if that's true, I know what I should have on December 31st, 2024, because by God, the year is already looking toasty. Have you seen the heat in just February? Mock crab salad offered an economical seafood alternative popular during wartime when fresh ingredients were scarce and expensive. Using imitation crab meat, typically made from processed white fish, home cooks could create a creamy, flavorful salad that resembled crab salad without the high cost. This recipe was particularly valued for its affordability and ease of preparation, requiring few ingredients beyond the imitation crab, mayonnaise, celery, and seasonings. Mock crab salad fit into the era's resourcefulness mindset, allowing families to enjoy familiar flavors despite rationing and shortages. It was versatile enough to be served on sandwiches, crackers, or as a standalone salad, making it a practical choice for lunches and light dinners. The dish reflected how cooks creatively substituted ingredients to maintain variety and nutrition in their meals. Mock crab salad stands as a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of mid-century American cooking during challenging times. Canned peaches with whipped cream was a beloved easy dessert in mid-century America, combining sweet canned peach slices topped with a generous layer of light, sweetened whipped cream. This no-fuss treat required no baking or cooking, making it a go-to choice for families wanting a simple yet satisfying finish to any meal. The juicy, tender peaches paired perfectly with the creamy richness of the whipped topping, creating a classic combination of textures and flavors. Often served in individual bowls or dishes, this dessert was a staple at summer dinners, holiday gatherings, and potlucks. Its convenience and deliciousness reflected the 1960s love for canned goods and quick recipes that fit busy lifestyles. Though fresh fruit desserts have become more popular today, canned peaches with whipped cream remain a nostalgic symbol of easy homemade sweets from the era. Egg and ketchup stir-fry over rice was the no-fuss pantry lunch that every family had in their back pocket when groceries were running low but bellies still needed filling. You cracked a couple of eggs into a pan, scrambled them up with a little oil, added a squirt of ketchup, and poured the whole thing over leftover rice. That was it. Done in under 10 minutes, salty, tangy, and surprisingly satisfying for something so simple. Kids loved it because it tasted like breakfast and lunch at the same time, with just enough of that sweet ketchup kick to keep things interesting. Parents leaned on it because it used what they already had in the kitchen. Eggs, rice, and ketchup were always hanging around. Some families added soy sauce, scallions, or even a slice of processed cheese to stretch it further, but most kept it basic and fast. You could find this recipe scribbled in lunch guides, tucked inside old homemaker cookbooks, or passed along by neighbors who knew how to stretch leftovers into a real meal. It was not fancy, but it filled you up when time and money were tight. In the 18th century, Pennsylvania Dutch settlers brought with them a culinary tradition that turned flour and sugar into a carnival-worthy creation. While funnel cakes are often associated with fairgrounds today, their roots are firmly planted in Amish and Mennonite communities. Originally known as dripping cake, these crispy, golden treats were a testament to the art of turning simple ingredients into something spectacular. The batter itself is straightforward: flour, eggs, milk, sugar, and a pinch of baking powder. The magic happens when it's poured through a funnel into hot oil, creating delicate, lacy designs that are as pleasing to the eye as they are to the palate. A dusting of powdered sugar finishes the masterpiece, though modern variations might add cinnamon or fruit toppings. Funnel cakes required minimal ingredients and no fancy equipment, making them accessible to families with limited means. Leftover batter could be saved for another day, stretching resources even further. Health benefits might not be the first thing you associate with fried dough, but there's no harm in a little indulgence now and then. And if you're making them at home, you control the oil, portion size, and toppings. Maybe you're tired of the typical available options for glucose. Maybe you've had your fill of brown sugar, and maybe you don't really want that sugar-free diet alternative they sell in stores for everything either. A very nice Amish alternative to typical options for sugar was essentially just beet sugar. Amish and rural Midwestern families almost entirely depended on beet sugar, in fact. From locally grown sugar beets instead of imported sugarcane, they really showcased how the land could give you everything you needed if you knew how to cultivate it. It was something that became extremely popular in Amish farming communities, and sugar beet farming has a long history in tastes like Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Most descendants of those farmers live there now too, and they do still keep local refineries stocked and loaded with sugar beets. What's the difference, though? Well, to be honest, there really isn't much. Beet sugar is nearly identical to cane sugar, and you could make essentially every last thing you were used to making with normal sugar with this. You could bake your cakes, do your elaborate cookie designs, pies, sweetened preserves, and jams, and have all kinds of homemade candy. If anything, you might notice a slight aftertaste that's different from your usual sugar, but it's not anything that really disturbs the vibe of the meal. In fact, most Amish families preferred these over molasses, especially for sweetening apple butter and coffee. Ham and cheese roll-ups offered a simple, no-fuss solution to lunchtime or snack needs during the mid-century years. These roll-ups combined thin slices of ham and cheese wrapped inside soft bread or tortillas, providing a quick and satisfying bite without the need for heating or cooking. The appeal lay in their portability and ease of assembly, making them ideal for packed lunches or impromptu snacks. Kids and adults alike enjoyed these nostalgic treats for their familiar flavors and straightforward construction. Roll-ups were a go-to option for busy households, especially when time was limited but nourishment was essential. Often, they incorporated whatever deli meats and cheeses were on hand, making them versatile and budget-friendly. The recipe's popularity endured because it required minimal preparation and no special kitchen tools, allowing even novice cooks to put together a tasty meal in minutes. Beyond convenience, the ham and cheese roll-ups evoke memories of school days and simple family gatherings, carrying a comforting sense of familiarity. They reflect a time when classic ingredients combined in practical ways to meet everyday needs without sacrificing taste. Tuna salad stuffed tomatoes were a colorful and nutritious 10-minute recipe featuring halved tomatoes filled with a quick tuna salad mixture, perfect for lunches or light dinners. The tuna salad was typically made by combining canned tuna with mayonnaise, chopped celery, onions, and seasonings, then spooned into hollowed tomato halves for a visually appealing presentation. This dish offered a refreshing balance of creamy, tangy tuna salad with the juicy, slightly acidic tomato, making it a satisfying yet light meal option. Popular in 1960s America, tuna salad stuffed tomatoes embodied the trend of combining convenience foods with fresh produce for speedy preparation. Served chilled, they were often enjoyed at picnics, buffets, or simple home meals. While less common today, this recipe remains a charming example of mid-century quick dishes that balance taste, nutrition, and ease. Leftover spaghetti sandwiches were the oddball lunch that quietly stuck around in frugal kitchens long after most people thought they had disappeared. You grabbed cold spaghetti, sauce and all, layered it between slices of white bread, and toasted the whole thing in a skillet until golden and crisp. It sounds strange now, but back then, this was a smart way to stretch last night's dinner into something new without spending another dime. Families with growing kids loved this one because it was hearty, fast, and filled everyone up on the cheap. The bread got crispy, the spaghetti heated through, and suddenly leftovers did not seem so boring. Some folks added shredded cheese, extra sauce, or even a little garlic butter if they wanted to dress it up, but most kept it plain. You could find this recipe scribbled on old note cards, passed along at community potlucks, or tucked inside faded cookbooks under fast lunches or leftover meals. It was quirky, salty, and filling, which is probably why people kept making it even when their cupboards were nearly empty. In Amish kitchens, leftovers are never wasted. They're opportunities. Potato cakes are a perfect example of this philosophy. These golden, crispy patties evolved as a way to breathe new life into yesterday's mashed potatoes. Historically, dishes like this reflected the Amish commitment to resourcefulness, ensuring that every bit of food served a purpose. The ingredients are straightforward and likely already in your pantry. Cold mashed potatoes, an egg for binding, a bit of flour, and a touch of salt and pepper. Some variations include grated onions, cheese, or herbs for extra flavor. The mixture is formed into small patties, pan-fried until crisp on the outside and tender within. It's a simple process, but the result is nothing short of magical. The versatility of potato cakes is unmatched. They can be served for breakfast alongside eggs, as a snack with a dollop of sour cream, or as a side dish at dinner. If you're feeling adventurous, try adding chopped ham or veggies to the mix. Nutritionally, these cakes deliver a good dose of energy from the potatoes and protein from the egg. From a frugality standpoint, they're a dream, stretching leftovers into something exciting and delicious. Dried apples were essentially just this massive staple of Amish people. It was how they worked with apples before refrigeration became a nationwide thing you could never escape. I guess nationwide is the wrong term. Almost everyone has refrigerators nowadays. You ever want those two-door ones? I'm getting off topic. Actually, I'm not. You wouldn't even need those two-door ones if you knew how to dry apples. See, Amish people would essentially just string up apple slices onto thread and hang them across rafters so that they would dry naturally. And this basically allowed an incredible amount of air circulation. Now, I know your immediate first question is going to be, what about the bugs? Who's keeping them away? Wouldn't they pile up all over the slices? And the answer to your question is no. The air circulation also helps to keep those bugs away. Dried apples were completely harmless, safe, and a great natural way of preserving apples. Otherwise, so many people in Amish and Pennsylvania Dutch communities wouldn't have been relying on them and making schnitz pies and dumplings out of them. Creamed corn on toast served as a comforting and quick Southern-inspired dish that made the most of pantry staples. This recipe blended tender corn kernels with a creamy sauce, often thickened with butter and milk, poured generously over toasted bread. The result was a rich, warm meal or side that offered both softness and a touch of sweetness in every bite. Creamed corn on toast was favored for its simplicity, requiring little time or complicated ingredients, yet delivering a satisfying flavor. Its roots lay in Southern cooking traditions where corn was a dietary mainstay and stretching meals creatively was common. This dish was especially popular during times when fresh vegetables were scarce, but canned or frozen corn was more readily available. It provided comfort and nourishment with minimal fuss, fitting perfectly into the fast-paced routines of mid-century households. The toast added a pleasant crunch that contrasted with the smoothness of the creamed corn, making it a textural delight. Over the years, it became a nostalgic favorite remembered for its humble origins and dependable appeal. Bacon-wrapped dates were a quick and flavorful appetizer combining smoky, salty bacon with sweet, chewy dates. This simple yet indulgent dish provided a delightful contrast in taste and texture that made it a popular choice for parties and casual gatherings during the mid-century era. The recipe required minimal ingredients and little time, making it accessible to home cooks looking to impress guests without elaborate preparations. Bacon-wrapped dates reflected a trend toward finger foods that offered both richness and a hint of exotic sweetness, appealing to evolving palates. The dish also showcased the inventive use of contrasting flavors typical of the period's culinary experimentation. Its ease of preparation and crowd-pleasing nature helped cement its place on appetizer menus and family celebrations alike. Bacon-wrapped dates remain a beloved classic that represents mid-20th century America's knack for combining simple ingredients into memorable bites. Quick chili cheese dip was a warm, spicy appetizer made by combining canned chili with shredded cheese and heating briefly until melted and bubbly. This 10-minute recipe was perfect for parties, game days, or casual get-togethers, delivering a satisfying mix of smoky, cheesy, and spicy flavors. The dip was often served with tortilla chips or crackers, making it easy to share and enjoy in a communal setting. Its simplicity and speed reflected mid-century America's love for convenience foods that could be whipped up without much fuss. Using canned chili ensured the dip was budget-friendly and accessible to many households. Although chili cheese dip remains popular today, the quick homemade versions of the 1960s had a distinctive charm rooted in combining pantry staples into crowd-pleasing dishes. This recipe embodies the era's knack for hearty, flavorful snacks that made entertaining both easy and delicious. Dried beef was sometimes known as chipped beef, but it actually involved a lot of practices and preservation techniques that have been traditionally passed down through several generations across many regions of America. Basically, stuff like salt curing, air drying, and the like. The Amish are probably not the only ones who have dabbled in dried beef production, especially with how many families in the South and Midwest used to live off of techniques like this. Salting and curing fresh cuts of beef was something that was common knowledge to you by 12 and a part of your daily routine by 15, and the classic Amish military dish was usually creamed chipped beef on a toast. The soldiers in the military had some pretty colorful remarks about this dish because apparently it looks like someone took a dunk on some toast, if that still stirs up your appetite. A less visually distracting version of this dish is the casserole variant, which never was too popular in Amish communities but was definitely still something they whipped out on special occasions, especially those who were living in urban areas like New York and Detroit. Baked oatmeal, a staple in Amish kitchens, transforms a humble pantry ingredient into a dish that's as cozy as it is satisfying. Its origins lie in the Amish knack for turning basic staples into hearty meals, especially for large families or early risers heading out to work. The base ingredients couldn't be simpler: rolled oats, milk, eggs, brown sugar, and butter, with a pinch of cinnamon for warmth. Once mixed and baked, the result is a golden, cake-like texture that's worlds apart from your average stovetop oatmeal. Best of all, it reheats beautifully, making it ideal for busy mornings or meal prepping. Customization is where baked oatmeal truly shines. Add apples and raisins in the fall, fresh berries in the summer, or even chocolate chips for a touch of indulgence. Leftovers can be sliced and eaten cold, or warmed up with a splash of milk. Health-wise, baked oatmeal delivers. Packed with fiber, protein, and slow-burning carbs, it keeps you full for hours. Frugality is its charm, using ingredients most kitchens already have. It's breakfast with all the benefits of comfort food. No shortcuts, just wholesome simplicity baked to perfection. Quick shrimp cocktail emerged as a popular 1950s appetizer that combined pre-cooked shrimp with a tangy cocktail sauce, offering an elegant yet simple starter. This dish required minimal preparation, as cooked shrimp could be chilled and served with a zesty sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The shrimp cocktail embodied mid-century America's fascination with easy entertaining and accessible luxury. It provided a sophisticated touch to gatherings without demanding hours in the kitchen. Shrimp cocktail's popularity was boosted by the growing availability of frozen and pre-cooked seafood products, which made it feasible for home cooks to offer seafood dishes more regularly. The cold, crisp shrimp paired with a flavorful sauce created a refreshing contrast that was perfect for parties or light meals. Its presentation in cocktail glasses or on platters added to its charm. This dish remains a classic example of mid-century Americana's blend of convenience and class. Chilled tomato gazpacho shots were a refreshing and flavorful cold appetizer that offered a taste of Mediterranean cuisine adapted to American kitchens in the 1960s. This recipe blended fresh tomatoes with cucumber, bell pepper, garlic, and seasonings into a smooth, chilled soup served in small shot glasses or appetizer cups. Gazpacho's cool temperature and vibrant, tangy flavor made it an ideal starter for summer meals and dinner parties, providing a light and healthy option before the main course. The quick blending process meant the dish could be prepared in 10 minutes or less, fitting the growing desire for fast yet impressive recipes. These tomato gazpacho shots showcased the era's interest in international flavors and novel presentations that elevated simple ingredients. Though gazpacho is more widely known today, serving it in shot-sized portions remains a charming retro way to enjoy this classic cold soup. This recipe reminds us of the 1960s fascination with global cuisine and stylish entertaining made easy. If these Amish recipes warmed your heart, tell us your favorite in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to keep the old kitchen spirit alive.